Welcome to the Road Dog Project. This is Don Muzquiz and my canine co-host Leon. Thanks to celebrity coaches, we're hitting the road and talking to the pros that make concerts and live events happen. If you'd like to support the channel, we'd appreciate a big thumbs up, and please enjoy the episode. On this episode, the one and only BUFORD Jones, a world-renowned audio engineer whose career spans 5 decades and has toured, mixed, and recorded with over 32 major touring artists, not the least of which includes his enormous contribution during his time with Pink Floyd. In 1970, Jones walked into one of the largest sound companies of the era and had no idea that it would change the course of his life and that he would soon become one of the most sought-after audio engineers anywhere. At Showco, the premier concert audio company in Dallas, BUFORD not only helped establish their dominance in the industry, but also pioneered mixing live concerts in stereo before it became commonplace. In recent years, he was enlisted by Meyer Sound as a live audio educator and most recently became a professor at Belmont University. From Dallas, Texas, now in Tennessee, he is the BUFORD Jones. Thank you for doing this, BUFORD.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you choosing me to do this.
Oh, we are very honored. When was the last time you were on a tour bus? Can you remember?
Wow. No, I having a hard time remembering that. I think it's been 10 years or something like that, maybe close to it. I'd say, every bit of 10 years.
Did you prefer the bus to the plane? Depend on...
Yes, I did. I preferred the bus to any form of travel just because you kind of relax out, do what you want to do. If it's not 12 people aboard, and then it's kind of a little congested.
Yeah, that's true.
Other than that, getting to know good friends. No, it's a preferred way of travel for me. When I was touring, that was quite common, but I was fortunate enough to travel with the artists, of many of the artists that I worked for. And that's something I laid down at a certain point in my career. I felt that what I do is a musician. I really had that in my bones more than I had the technical aspects, which I did. I graduated with a degree in electronics in '69. And that was the first thing I did was repair stereos. I did that for a couple of years and really enjoyed it. And then I was fine with it. You mentioned the Showco thing earlier enough, and going back to the beginning, we had a huge warehouse, one of the biggest repair centers for Sony, Samsung, everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. I can't think of anybody we didn't do TIAC. And rows and rows and rows. It was near Parkland Hospital. It was this big building, and so it's always been a challenge for me. I go back to my dad, who bought me a Heathkit tube radio for Christmas one year. I put that thing together. I was so fascinated that I could solder all of these electronics together, and it would do something. I really wasn't lingering or looking. I got to build something I can hear music on. It was just build something that'll do something.
Yeah.
And so I built that, and I think after I got it and heard it a little bit, played a little bit, I tore it apart and built it back together again. That was what was fascinating to me. So at any rate, as it went on, and I was sitting there working at that place. It's called Electromech in Dallas, and I've been living there a while. And a friend who come up, actually, he was a cousin of Rusty Boucher of Showco. But we had met briefly, and he told me, he says, hey, there's a company down the road, which was Showco, and I didn't know that at the time. And he said, you really need to go talk with those guys. My hair was getting pretty long. It was down on my shoulders then, and got a little bit longer than that. But so anyway, I go down to Showco, and I have a meeting with Jack Max and Rusty Boucher and Jack Calmes. And they took the time. I walked in the door. I had no idea what they did. I had no idea. This friend says, you just need to go talk to him.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. And I walk in and I see these big, huge speakers around, and I'm going, man, that'd be cool to plug my guitar into.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I had no clue. and I sat down and talked to them. They wanted to know, one, did I have a degree? And I said, yes, in electronics. They said, that's great. Two, you have a studio? Yes, I do. And I play guitar. My dad built guitars and pedal steels. And so I played guitar, and they said, that's really good, music. And you have the studio, so you wire equipment. That's great. Then they go, are you married? And I thought, what in the world does that have to do with anything? Yeah. And I said, no. And I found out a year later what that "are you married" meant. Yeah. Because once I took that job on, I think I spent 11 months out of the next year on the road.
On the road, yeah.
And so that's what that was. You can go away and be gone, and you're not going to have too many complaints. So, at any rate, they really didn't tell me what I was doing. They really didn't tell me much about the company. I just knew that it was more money than what I was making at the time. So I took the job, and the next morning, after this afternoon of this interview, the next morning I go into the shop, which is what I figured I would be doing.
Right.
And I was soldering snakes and analog snakes, and 27 pair of Belden snakes and connectors, and I was soldering these things up, and it was interesting to me, and okay, great, everything's fine, got a different job, right, and meeting a lot of nice people, and then by that afternoon of the same first day, Jack Maxon came in to me, who was mixing Three Dog Night at the time, and he says, go home, pack your bags, come back here, load this truck up, and you'll be going to Atlanta, and you'll be on the Three Dog Night tour. That doesn't happen.
No, that's a nice first day.
And Three Dog Night at that time was in their heyday. It was a stadium gig. The first gig that I ever set foot on was Atlanta Fulton Stadium with Three Dog Night. And Shoko had 2 sound systems. They had just built a second one, to my memory. Right. And we had both sound systems there. And so, okay, I like to play with speakers and microphones and all this stuff. It came very natural and very fast to me. But that sort of an entry is just unheard of. That, once here I'm with Three Dog Night. Now, at that time period, in 1970, they would only go out on the weekends. Yeah. It was one of a few bands. Now, we would know that in country music, but rock music didn't do that.
They stayed out all week.
But they had enough success and money to where they were satisfied with that. They'd go out on the weekends. They'd go back to L.A. on the weekdays. And so what that meant, that would leave us in our trucks, driving the gear and doing all of that. That would leave us in certain parts of the country. Well, we didn't have cell phones then, so when I'd call into the office, they'd go like, well, there's an It's a Beautiful Day gig you got to go do. Okay, so we drive there and do this gig, and while we're driving there, or we might have the next phone conversation. Oh, we got the Guess Who. When you finish this up with It's a Beautiful Day, you go do the Guess Who.
Right.
Okay. And so this just kept revolving. So during the weekdays, it was those sort of groups, left and right. These are all groups that came extremely established. Right. And so I'm meeting all of them right away. And we're having fun. I'm 21 at the time. So, yeah, it was having lots of fun. And so I kept doing these groups. And then after a year on the road with Shoko with Three Dog, some tours started popping up. We did on a weekend where I think it was Leonard Skinner. When I first heard Leonard Skinner in their great day, in their best days, and I met ZZ Top. So they had just come out with Trace Ombres. Yeah. It had not gone platinum yet. Yeah. But they were doing LaGrange. They were still in blue jeans and white T-shirts and just plug right into the Marshalls and go. Yeah. And so I was a Texan. They're a Texan. At that time, ZZ Top, if you weren't a Texan, you couldn't be.
Yeah, exactly.
You couldn't be associated. So I fit that bill. And It was an interesting thing that they had a very lovely gentleman who was mixing their sound that really had no background at all, and he was a wonderful guy. I really enjoyed being around him, but the pressure that the manager was putting on him to make this three-piece sound the way that he wanted it to sound, after a couple of weeks of me witnessing that, I just decided I got to help this guy out. I don't know that I can solve the problem, but I got to help him out.
Yeah.
So I did that, and the manager would be standing nearby, and he'd go, yeah. And I go, okay. So I hoped that he was okay with this thing, and then the next thing I know, they told me, you're doing this, but they transferred him to the stage, and I think he was very relieved to get out of that enormous hot seat, unbelievable. So I sat down with it, and we got along real well, and mixing that band, oh man, I mean, that was just
was that your
such
first
blistering rock, blues rock.
Sure.
And it was in a time period, too, where it was so much fun when we were playing. I think some of the greatest memories of going in the Northeast. You know, it was ZZ Top at that time period when Trace Amory's first came out, could sell out the Astrodome, but yet they could go not sell out Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And so we played a lot of theaters in the Northeast, in Boston and New Jersey and what have you. And it was simply amazing to watch that band night after night bring the house down. Yeah. It would just be in chaos.
Making new fans.
A lot of people didn't know who they were. And in fact, they were opening for Uriah Heep at this time. And as a lot of people do, when they go to the show for the headliner they want to see, they might come late. They might not know the opening act or care so much or whatever. But in other words, a lot of people were coming in while ZZ played. And when they finished their show, there used to be, I remember, just as people are going up to the lobby to get their drinks or whatever, they'd stop by the console and go, who was that?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have anything written, you know, on the drum
signage
header anyway. I said, that was ZZ Top, a little old band from Texas. And that was just repeated over and over. No matter where they went, they took the place down. So it was a great thing for me and just having fun and my first band to mix. And it just started to snowball from that. And then a couple other groups come in that I was out with. And then I started going out a lot with Skinnerd. And during their heyday, and this would have been a year before the plane crash, and I was out quite a bit. Kevin Elson mixed that tour, so I was the system engineer. But Skinnerd was another one during that time period that by the time they finished their show, I mean, it was something to watch. Now, I know there's a lot of other groups that do that as well, monumental groups that have done it. But I mean, these guys, the way they would build their energy and the excitement for us to work with that and want to do it again and again and again was amazing. And so after I'd been out with Skinnerd for, I really don't recall, I think it was around 6 months and something like that, 4 or 5 months. And then because I didn't mix them, and I worked with Kevin, but I enjoyed it. But I got the call, or I got the notice that Linda Ronstadt was going out, and I had already worked with her, and I mixed her. So here I got the message from Showco, Linda Ronstadt's going out. You're gonna mix it again. I said, well, okay, then I'm gonna leave Skinnerd and go out with Linda. And I did just that, and just I think 3 weeks or a month later, the plane went down. That I had been on many times. And
you probably would have been had you not taken that other job.
No doubt about it. I would have been. So I owe that to Linda in a lot of ways, and I've told her since I've talked to her. But I love those guys. They were tremendous to me, and a lot of dear friends. It's just such a sad thing for me.
Absolutely.
And having such a close relationship, and then that happened the way that it happened. So then things just kept snowballing. But
right. Well, let me ask you, if I can go back just for a second. When you went on the road, when they told you to pack your bags the first day, you go on the road and you're on Three Dog Night.
Packed a big suitcase and a box of Tide.
There you go. And did you? What were your responsibilities? Did you have a specific job title? Were you systems engineer? Were you just assisting? What were you learning?
When I came on at Choco, there were very few engineers there. I mean, Jack mixed Three Dog Night, Rusty mixed Led Zeppelin, and that was their two main accounts. Yeah. And then they had Cat Stevens and Chuck Conrad was mixing Cat Stevens. And then Leon Russell came in. Several others were mixing them. Losing my names here. I had no idea. And then again, it was system engineer, and that fitted me just right. But then after a while, I began to say that, it took about 5 years, that this is fun, this is great. I'm working with a lot of incredible talent, seeing shows, but I'm a player.
Yeah,
I'm a player.
Yeah.
I like to put things together, make them work. I like to fix them and make them work. But, it's like I'm a player. I want to play. So I made a pretty clear point about that time, and I stood by it. By the 10th year that I left Choco and went independent as a sound mixer, every artist that I would get a call from, and when I would speak to their management about the final whatever, I said, hey, I'm just not interested in setting up black boxes anymore. I like it. I'm fascinated by the newest, greatest stuff, but it's not my cookie. So it's like I want to play, and I think the mixing console is another instrument, just like a keyboard or a guitar is to a musician. It's detached from the stage, and I set out away from them, but I'm part of them.
Absolutely.
Jackson Browne in 1980 was the first to call me and say that, Buford, you're one of the band. And I go, great, would you pay me like that?
Yeah, there you go. But you actually made the proposal to their manager, to Linda's manager, correct?
Yep.
To come out and be an independent sound engineer to travel and work with the band. And
I did. I had already been working with Linda Ronstadt. I had done a couple of tours with her and through Choco as a Choco employee. And then Peter Asher was her management, who also managed James Taylor. And I'd done, I think, one tour at that time with James. And I said to Peter one night, I says, look, the frequency of travel that Choco has me doing, and I understand that's what they needed to do to meet their things. And I never looked at it as a hard that Choco was pushing me or anything of the sort. It was just the demand was really big in the 70s. Yeah. And I said, I don't know if I can keep doing this, being on the road 10 months a year, 11 months a year. So I said, would you hire me?
Yeah.
And Peter said, of course, absolutely. And I said, can I travel with the band? Absolutely. And can I do that? Because most engineers, if you don't have the opportunity, which I don't think even be able to fathom what it is to travel with the artist.
Right.
It's nothing to do with prestige. It's nothing to do with...
It was the communication.
Communication. We get on the bus, and every group that I think I've ever done that with, there's always 2 or 3 members of the band that want to talk about the show and make it better.
Yeah.
And then there's 3 or 4 that they've had enough.
Yeah.
They just
They're
want to
done.
go party and do what they do. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I've always keyed on those ones that were really in tune to making the show and making it better. Generally, the band leader or arranger.
Yeah.
I love to mingle with producers. I love to mingle with studio engineers who did the project. How did you get that sound?
Yeah.
What do I need to get that? And this was my knowledge base and my career both just escalated tremendously.
Yeah.
And I think the ability to mix. So I was recording show tapes, which is very controversial in the 70s, not only the legality of it, but I made sure that it was okay by word of the artist, because I wanted to listen to what I did and to be able to improve upon what I did.
Right.
And there's that argument during that time period that, well, you can't listen to a show tape. Well, if you can't listen to a show tape, well, then you're not doing things right. Yeah. You don't understand how to calibrate a sound system in the first place. You don't take control of the stage. Right. And when you put these elements together, you can make very representable show tapes. And the first one that I listened to was with, to give a good point, was with Linda Ronstadt. And it was about 1980. And it was on my... I started this.
Yeah.
And I recorded the show, and then we all went to the back of the bus at that night. I'll never forget it. And in the back of the bus, Linda Ronstadt sitting right in the middle. I'm sitting right next to her, and then Peter Asher on the other side of me. That's
a hot
and then the rest of the band.
That's a hot seat.
Around the curve. Yeah, and his cassettes.
Yeah.
We put in the cassette. Wow. Yeah, it doesn't quite.
It didn't sound
quite, but it's pretty close. Yeah, kind of not. Linda says, "Where's the guitar?" It'll be there tomorrow night. That's all I knew to say.
Yeah.
And it is a type of thing when you're in that sort of environment.
Yeah.
And somebody points something out to you, don't have to take notes. You don't have to write it down.
You'll remember.
You'll remember it.
Yeah.
It'll come up to you tomorrow.
Well, and
then I realized that the guitar was just directly pointed at me. It's probably louder in the mix or softer in the mix because I'm hearing more of it, so I'm thinking it's fine when really I don't have control of it. So things like that, those type of thoughts that came into me where I had to control the stage a little bit more, police the stage, let them do what they do, but if I can make it a little bit better, then it works out better for me, which in turn works out better for all of us. Right. That's where I learned all of that.
Yeah, well, that's why those recordings are so handy.
You just don't get that. Yeah. I'm sorry, you just don't get that of a day of walking up on a stage day after day, year after year, and never having any direct contact with your band and understanding what they're putting across. And this went for the rest of my career. Yeah. I record every show. Every night we listened to it. Like I said, I had key members on Pink Floyd, for instance. It was John Caron, who had an amazing awareness of all their library of every song they ever did, where they recorded it, who played on it, whatever. Yeah. And when he would listen to the recordings with me, he would compliment a lot of sections, and then he would say, "Buford, this guitar part and this keyboard part is really vital to establish this element, which may or may not be involved with the hook. Maybe it does accent the hook, and it really needs to be in there." And I go, wow, I couldn't wait till the next day to do that. I could also, another interesting point of this, being on the back of the bus, traveling right after the show, things are still fresh on your mind. So we'd be listening to a show tape, whichever ones would listen. I'd be listening to I can remember one specific with Billy Payne of Little Feat, and Billy Payne would be talking to Waddy Wachtel, and they were saying, I'm not even in this conversation, but I'm hearing it. Yeah, he said, in the bridge to that tune, I was playing this figure and trying to lock in with what you were doing or something like that. I'm just overhearing this.
Yeah.
Next to that sound check, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
You'll never learn things like that if you don't have this close. So I was blessed thoroughly to be able to have that opportunity, and that they would trust me. And I'm the first to admit to a mistake. I think that's the other, that a lot of sound engineers that there's problems at times and things that exist. I mean, if there's a blatant, abrupt loud feedback,
Yeah.
and it's me, I won't hesitate to put my hand up in there.
Yeah.
I've seen many times a pop on the stage. It's all of a sudden it's the loudest firecracker amplified 1,000 times pop.
Yeah.
And the artist says, "What was that?"
Yeah.
And nobody says nothing.
Yeah.
You don't hear no reply.
Yeah.
The problem isn't fixed if you
Right.
can't fess up.
Yeah.
Hey, that was me. That's me. If it's feedback, I can go to the artist after the show and say, "Hey, I was really struggling to get your vocal on top."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the band was pretty loud in this particular theater.
Right.
I'm trying to get in the proximity of the PA. When I bring your vocal up, it's feeding back on me a lot.
Yeah.
So I had to bring the band down. I had to do whatever in that situation. They go, "Oh, okay. I know what's happening." If you don't have that in your defense,
Yeah.
then you're going to be getting a plane ticket home and not know why. I'll give one other, for instance, on this because I think it's extremely important. We're talking about communication with the band.
Right.
And a major tour, I won't mention the name, a major tour. And I knew from various industry communications and awareness that this mixer was on the edge and wanted him to stay there, wanted him to be there for many reasons. I really wasn't mixing at that point. I was consulting. And so after I witnessed these struggles and were these political things going on
Yeah.
all the way around,
Yeah.
and I asked this person, I says, "Look, I see what you're doing and it all looks intact to me, but," I says, "how much communication have you had with the artist?" Now this was at rehearsals on a tour, big tour that was starting in another continent, and I think they rehearsed for 5 days, 4 days, 5 days. And the third day, I could tell things were just not smooth.
Yeah.
And I said, "How much communication have you had with your artist?" And he says, "Well, I'm the production manager. I get off the bus at 6 in the morning and da-da-da-da-da-da-da." And I said, "Yeah, but how often do you talk to your artist?" And he says, "None."
Yeah.
And I just went, wow.
Yeah.
And my heart sunk
Yeah.
that you're not going to pull through this if you don't, And sure enough, a week later, he was gone. And, if you walk up to the artist and they don't want to hear who and what and how great you are, they don't want to hear that. And
Right.
they certainly don't want to hear technical jargon in a way that you're trying to impress them with what you know and that you're okay to be there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be there if your credits already weren't in order.
Exactly.
They would make sure of that. So it's just letting them know that you're passionate and that your heart is in it and that we can overcome anything. There's a certain consistency or inconsistencies on the road that we have to deal with night for night, but that will give you leverage. So it's many nights. I would get to the artist's dressing room before they do, after they've walked off the stage. It was part of my routine. As soon as that show's finished, bam, right to the dressing room. And we either want to do high five, or we might say, wow, had a rough time with the low end in here. A lot of reflections in this room, and I wasn't getting the clarity out of the bass guitar that I wanted tonight. But make this short and brief. No technical.
Yeah.
So now when I leave and the bass guitarist's wife comes in the room, "I couldn't hear my husband tonight at all." And then the artist goes, Buford came in here to kind of explain why that might be the case.
Yeah.
You can easily see the advantage of it. And it's surprising to me that the industry, the Nashville industry, doesn't quite see it that way.
Yeah. It's not
And
much.
how important sound is to sell records. Primarily in the 70s and 80s, 90s, it was all about record sales.
Sure.
What we're doing, and I learned that early in the 70s, I don't know really where and how, but what we were doing out there, we're not just entertaining a group of people in a given city, we're selling them a product.
Yeah.
So that product is the album. If you take that seriously and you give them the best possible show that the artist and yourself in combination can do, well, then that's going to sell more albums. People that hasn't bought the album already will go and get the album.
Yeah.
this keeps the whole cycle rolling. They make more money. Therefore, there's another tour 2 years from now. They have the budget now to go back in the studio and do another thing. So I understand. This keeps it rolling. We're not just doing a gig and say, hey, we played the gig and it's a fun show and let's move on. Did we make a statement?
Yeah.
Did we capture this the best that we could, so it's going to help the industry, and help their career? And that was my main
Absolutely.
objective.
Well, you have endless stories from a lot of these artists. I want to pick at a couple of these things. I'm gonna jump around here a little bit. So with Pink Floyd, Momentary Lapse of Reason, which was a huge tour, started out with just a few dates and just kind of kept adding on. But one of the dates you did was in Venice, Italy, and before Pink Floyd showed up, the city governments were protesting because they were worried about the concert volume being damaging to the historical structures. I don't know how much of this that you got. So somewhere along the line, where the promoter or the management apparently made a compromise in saying
what?
They made a compromise saying instead of playing on land, they were going to play on a barge in the water. Is this coming back to you? In 89? So
Venice, 89, yeah.
Yeah. And so they're going to play on a barge, and the other compromise was that they would reduce the volume, the expected dB level of the concert. I'm just wondering if they had a conversation with you about that.
None at all.
Yeah.
I had no communication whatsoever with the local authorities,
but the promoter
that
or anybody
would typically be, and that is an interesting point for any sound mixer that's approached by a promoter or a city official and said that there's SPL restrictions here. And I go, if I work for you, I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah.
But I work for this manager.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
If he tells me to turn it down, I'll turn it down.
Yeah.
So please speak to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
In some cases, I think it's probably happened in many cases where the promoters let the manager know that you'll be fined if you go over a certain SPL, and then they'll go, "What's the fine? $1,000." Okay, well here's $1,000, and I just
go away.
Leave us alone. But I don't know how much that occurred. But in there, no, I was never aware of that. We knew that when they tried to play the Pyramids. Now that brought up they really were trying to get that on, and it's one thing. The only reason why we didn't play the Pyramids is because the sound level vibrations that they figured would be damaging, not to people's hearing as much as, and it wasn't that loud. Pink Floyd's show was dynamic, very dynamic.
Yeah.
I think that's what really made it interesting. That at times it's pleasant rock. It's just come across nicely, and then sometimes it's just you're engulfed. You're just simply engulfed, but you're not in a negative way.
Right.
But the barge and playing on the barge, to my knowledge, now I've been to Venice twice. I've played there with Jackson Browne and also with Pink Floyd. So there's no place to put 200,000 people. The counts that I've seen, that I've gathered from YouTube and what they said, because it was a free concert.
Yeah.
It was the only free concert they ever did. And it was broadcast through Europe and Russia. And the counts that I've seen, the closest they can get to it, they don't know.
Yeah, sure.
But was 240,000 people.
Wow.
I have pictures, and there are pictures to see when you're looking back into Venice. You don't see an empty space whatsoever anywhere. And people own buildings, people everywhere. Now that was the controversy that we were hearing, is that the Venetians they would continually charge more money for these things to happen, In other words, the world's largest barge that came from I don't know where was brought there for the stage out in the big lagoon, and then they'd charge an enormous amount of money to park that there. Such an enormous amount of money that it almost put the show in jeopardy. The month, I think, before we did it, it was off, on, off, on, off, on. We're doing it, we're not. We're doing it, we're not. Almost right up to the show, and I think that was it. That's not part of my job, but I think that what I would hear in the grapevine, that it was a lot of that. Just a lot of different ways to, I think, for the locals to make some money off of it, and to and charge for these things that they didn't realize what was going to happen. And I think from all the other experiences, selling out Giant Stadium. 2 nights, 3 nights. Every gig across the United States and around the world. It happened so fast. We were contracted to do 40 shows when they called me. We did 200. And they could have booked another 200. So it was the most popular moment that I'm aware of in the Pink Floyd history. I think everything was great. They had a great album. The momentum was great. Just everything about the timing was really good. So, I played by the rules. They took my mix and they sent that to the broadcast. It was not broadcast out of another truck, which is rare, and that's part of making show tapes that sound like a presentable show.
On that particular show, I read that concert was broadcast to an estimated 100 million people. Does that sound about right?
I think that's right.
That's your mix.
That's my mix.
Your extension of the band. Do you remember where front of house was on that barge gig?
I had my own barge. The main barge, say this is the main barge, and the generators, the trucks were back here, and some catering and what have you, and the band and all the get-go. And then there was a bunch of little barges that connected together onto another much smaller barge, which was all of us in front of house. I've got pictures of that being brought in by a tugboat. It's really funny to see our setup, the front of house setup, being brought in by a tugboat. I tease that a lot when I show it to some students that, there's one you won't see again. But anyway, that's how we were connected. And then all the cables ran along those little connecting barges to our barge.
Wow.
So it was completely contained, and it was the only show that we did that was not surround, because we didn't have wireless at that time, and in a way that we would have ever even trusted that. So the towers couldn't have been put into the lagoon. And nonetheless, I mean, there were people in boats all surrounding the front of the stage. The gondoliers had an area to the right-hand side because they were complaining that this is another issue they had to deal with, that this event was clogging their traffic.
Right.
So I think the Pink Floyd gave them permission to have first choice at the front of the stage in a gondola.
Nice.
So I can imagine what they were charging
what that
for
ticket
that.
was. Yeah, absolutely.
So you wouldn't have been able to hear the gondoliers sing for you, but you wouldn't have needed them to sing for you.
That's an expensive date.
Yeah.
So we can't talk about that Pink Floyd without talking about surround, but we have to back up and talk about mixing in stereo, because that wasn't being done back in your day, and you started pushing that point.
There's a lot of issues I could talk about that. I was doing it when our mixers only had 2 sends on them, and I was taking the little rotary pot mixers, and I was taking one send and sending it to the left channel, and the right send and sending it to the other, and mixing them that way. Put a certain amount in the left channel, a certain amount in the right channel. Didn't have a pan pot. And I did this several times on Skinner because, well, I think some other acts maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's Beautiful Day. Maybe it was
ZZ Top.
I don't know. But I wanted the stereo effect. Now, it's really debatable. They say, well, the people on this side of the room don't hear what the people on this side of the room is. Well, then why do we have stereo to begin with?
Right.
If that's the case and if that's true, you go buy a very expensive stereo and you take it home. Well, there's only one pinpoint position that you can listen to it at.
Right.
And that's absurd.
Right.
They say, well, I can't hear what that side's doing, so I got to sit dead middle and I'll get the effect. But how could stereo ever exist? I mean, like I said, you go to the living room, you have to sit dead center, or don't listen to it at all. Don't turn it on because I'm not getting the effect.
Exactly.
Well, if you take a little bit of psychology and put this in on it, and then secondly is the development of systems and more horizontal dispersion. So the left to rights are crossing each other more so in the room, and people are hearing these. Now put some psychology with this. I think the best mix that an engineer can do is when he views his audience and the PA becomes transparent. You don't realize there's these big stack of boxes that's just blatant harsh sound. It's where you see an artist performing and you hear them and you hear everything they're doing.
Yeah.
You don't know where the sound system is.
Exactly.
That's the choice moment. Well, the horizontal dispersion came in, especially with line arrays, but point source systems, yes, we can curve them and get what we want out of it. So the psychological part of it, you're at a stage, you're sitting out here and say you're 4 rows back. Well, everything should be very stereo because your eyes and your mind are seeing it that way. Right. You expect to hear separation.
Exactly.
Take yourself and go up into the balcony at the last seat. What do you expect to hear? If you tried to analyze this, nobody's going to analyze it, but what do you expect? You're going to hear mono because everything's blended together at that point.
Yeah.
It doesn't distract you. It doesn't take anything away from the element, but it's mono.
Absolutely.
Now, what if you go here to the side in an arena and you're listening from over here? What do you expect to hear? I've heard a lot of people say, well, what do we put in the side fills? Mono, or do we put?
Yeah.
They cross them. They say, okay, this is the right, looking at me this way, stage. We take the right and put the right signal in, but here we'll put the left signal in. I've heard of that. So there's some stereo going on up here.
Yeah.
Well, let's try to reproduce stereo everywhere. But let's think of the people again, psychologically, what they're seeing when they look down. They're seeing a stage from a side view. They see no separation.
Yeah.
There should be no separation. So you make your side fills mono, you keep your front fills mono. I've always looked at the real estate on the stage, looked at this real estate out here, say, for the first 50 rows. It depends on the venue. First 50 rows or so. That's prime real estate. Now, everybody deserves an equally good show, but physics has not met that yet. Exactly. And I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime either.
No, I don't think so.
So these people have paid the most money. They've stood in line the longest to get their tickets. They're fans. They should not be shortchanged whatsoever, so that something else can be satisfied somewhere else in the arena.
Right.
Oh, we've managed sound. I remember certain groups, maybe not mentioning names, where their engineer would go up to the balcony, and wanted eye blinking in the balcony, and that's point source systems.
Yeah.
And it ain't loud enough. We need more PA.
Oh,
But look what you're doing in the first 10 rows. These people are getting blown out of their seats.
Right.
No, we need more PA.
Oh my God.
Okay, well, line arrays help that. Technology helped that through time. So to me, stereo, you just need to think it out a little bit, and it's very effective. And then when I started doing it on a regular basis, I had met many artists, many musicians that play for notable artists, to the point to where sometimes I'd do a show with Linda Ronstadt in LA, and 12, 14 nights there at the amphitheater, and there'd be a lot of musicians that I would have tell me that I sat 10 rows back and I thought I was listening to my home stereo.
Yeah. There you go.
Great.
That's what you want to hear.
If somebody on the top row back up there, you're just not going to accomplish that.
No.
Not everybody is going to hear it the same way. But give these people an enormous thrill. And I think that's where the Pink Floyd, I inherited the surround sound. I did not. They had been doing that on the wall.
Okay.
And I simply stepped into it.
I see.
But I firmly believe, they never told me directly, but I firmly believe that they felt that same principle. If there is 12,000 people in the center that get this amazing effect, let's give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It won't happen when you get up in the edges. But it depends on what you put through it. So you got to learn in surround mixing, you don't put instruments into the surround channels, because that, again, comes psychological. I see a guitar player, but I hear him back here. That ain't going to work. Now, if that guitar player is playing a solo, and out of nowhere, when he hits his first lick of the solo, there's an echo that's moving to the back of the room as he plays the solo. Like, wow. Wow. Solo's over with. Echo's over with. It's dynamic.
Dynamic.
When you hear surround mixing on television, which is easy to do, there's generally a static sound of sorts going through all those channels all the time. The way I've used surround, and I learned that on the David Bowie really more than I did on Pink Floyd. Can't use them for instruments, so it's like you take one song and say, wow, I'll take a reverb unit. I'll put the reverb unit to the rear. And then maybe it's one chorus. And then, wow, just put it in there, chorus is over with, it's off. So, wow, the listener gets, wow, that's cool. And it's gone away. If you had sound in a live concert and there's static material going on all the time in the rear channels, it would be distracting. Time alignment is never going to be the same for everybody.
Right.
So it's difficult to do, but effects you don't pinpoint that thing. So, and they gave me total freedom.
A lot of
with
creativity.
That. Nobody told me how it had to be done. And so that's the way I utilized it, and it worked extremely well. There were some pre-recorded tapes that would play, and things would move around the room pre-recordedly. But what I had on the console, and I had a separate console that took from sends on one of the main consoles. We had 136 inputs, but the 3 consoles. But the one that we would, I had a separate 4-channel with joysticks, 4 joysticks.
Okay.
So I could turn a send on any instrument. It would go to that joystick, and then I could move that around. I used that 2 times during the night. Okay. And that's it. You know, somebody who really wanted to play and have fun could go nuts with it, but no, it's you use it sporadically. You use it as a pronounced effect, and it's done with. And therefore, it's exciting and it's interesting.
To your point about talking to artists and being an extension of the band, you had a conversation with Gilmore when he talked about you were trying to emulate some of the records and things like that, using instead of your own creativity. Didn't he give you some license to play?
You've been doing some research. Well done.
Thanks.
That's one of the more remarkable things. We rehearsed for 6 weeks at an Air Canada hangar at Toronto International Airport. 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I was just learning everything. There was so much to learn out of these. The setup that we made, extremely large complex of 3.5 consoles. I say a half console is a 16-channel expander on a Midas Pro 40 for drums. So there's 56 inputs of drums. Well, enough. And then they let me hire 2 people to work with me and mix this. They had first suggested one, or they had offered one, and I said, I just somehow see this being a 3-man job. And I split it up that way. So, at any rate, the story that you're referring to was, I think, the second or third day, and I was out. The band had come in and was just kind of mingling around. Everybody very friendly. David is just one of the most remarkable, intelligent, and friendliest people I think I've ever met. And I used a technique back then with a 100th-second stopwatch to listen to a piece of material and time out the intervals. I count in intervals of 10.
Right.
And then I would time that and divide it by quarter notes or half notes or whole notes and know what to put my echo in. So I was listening to the album, and on Us and Them, the song Us and Them, that has vocal repeats, and I wanted to know what they are. So I was timing him. And he just happened to walk up as I was doing that. Hey, Buford, what you doing? I said, no, I'm just sitting here timing these intervals and this echo on the record so I get it just like the record. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. He says, you don't have to do this like the record. He says, be an artist and paint this picture any way you see it. And I went, wow.
Yeah.
Coming from him saying that, you know, if it came from 2 or 3 channels down, yeah, okay, yeah. I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
And he wasn't saying, I'm giving it all to you. You just sit out here and do what you want, you know, get loaded and give us a real wild mix. And no, it wasn't that. It was saying stay within the Pink Floyd signature, but at the same time, we're hiring you
Yeah.
for your abilities.
Yeah.
Don't hold back. So
Yeah.
it gave me a certain amount of confidence in that I felt that I could express myself once I had got their foundation intact.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things, if you listen to their records, you might, when you listen to it live, you might hear reverbs and things that weren't on the record.
Absolutely.
Or you might hear an echo that wasn't on this or that, or this or that, this and that. Because I felt that in the, and especially as it progressed and I learned the music so much better, it just enhanced it. That's all I know to say. It just enhanced it.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to do something that somebody else didn't do. It just enhanced it. And then in listening to show tapes with John Karen, well, then there it goes.
Yeah.
So to say the show tape thing, I could explain technically another time if you like why and how to do that.
Be sure to come back to the channel for part 2 and part 3 of our conversation with Buford Jones. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a thumbs up and we welcome your comments. Check out more of the Road Dog Project here on YouTube and follow on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Come on, Leon.